Hello. On behalf of the, oh, this is on? Sorry, I didn't mean to yell. On behalf of the Hugo History Commission, I'd like to welcome everybody here today. And we have the big event with Bruce this afternoon. I'll tell you a little bit how that happened. But I do want to say first, I'm glad you guys got here early to get the good seats. That was a little mix-up we apologize for. Sorry that you had to sit here waiting for us, but 1 o'clock is the official time. Anyhow, members of the Hugo Commission, we do projects throughout the years, and my last project was the namesake project. And of course, one of the first references that I looked at was the Houle book, the Michel Houle of Centreville family book. And I was, as I was going through it, I needed to verify the statement in that credited Victor Hugo as the namesake for the city of Hugo. And of course, the author of that book, Bruce Houle, is a classmate of mine. So I hadn't talked to Bruce in, 50 years or something like that, and but I did track him down on Ancestry, looking at Michel Houle's family tree. Found him in Montana, sent him an email, and one thing led to another, and here we all are here today. And so we're looking forward to this. As all of you know, the Houle book is pretty much the Bible of Centreville, Hugo, Onika Township, what's the word I want? Genealogy. There it is. Anyhow, so without any more, I would like to once again welcome you. Sorry that you got here so early, but introduce to Mr. Bruce Houle, author of Michel Houle, Family of Centreville.
Well, thank you, Craig. I want to thank the town of Hugo for inviting us. I would like to thank the Hugo Lions Club. This is their 45th year. They were A group officially as of May 1975. In getting the invite to the event today, I asked the wife to go through her jewelry box because it's probably not proper for a guy to do it. And I was looking for a pin, and she found it. It's the Hugo Lions Club charter member. Yeah. A long time ago. The book, before I go further, I put the picture up there to show my family to those who might have an interest. Of course, I am on the far end there. Next to me is my daughter, Yvonne. She lives in Egan. She was in 6th grade when we moved to Montana, and she stayed behind to finish and came back to us around July. She is one of those kind of gals that just accelerates and exceeds at everything she does. She graduated top of her class in our hometown. She was Miss Montana, Northeast Montana. She went on to college and came back to the Twin Cities here to St. Kate's. There was a lady that was from Montana that went to St. Kate's, and when she passed away, she left her estate to those Catholic girls who could qualify for a scholarship. Yvonne was one of those girls. She lives in Egan. Her kids attend school. One is in the University of Minnesota, and the other one is at Academy of Holy Angels. And they're at a track meet today, and that's why my wife, that bottled redhead there, is at that event, and she sends her apologies for not being here. The boy in between or next to my daughter and my wife is Bruce Jr. When he graduated at the top of his class in our hometown, he went to Colorado School of Mines for mineral. Spent 4 years there and moved to Twin Cities and finished college at the University of Minnesota. He's presently in Bloomington. He has an electrical engineering degree. He works for a medical firm that makes devices that go inside of our bodies when the doctors are needing assistance. Super sharp kid. When he talks about what he does, don't mean anything to me. They're in another world. The big tall kid is my youngest, and that's Weston. Went to the University of North Dakota, Grand Forks. Went on and finished his college degree. Presently, he runs a company called Weatherford, out of Weatherford, Texas. When you drill an oil well, you go to Weatherford to get their supplies to put the well together to drill. He runs that particular company in Williston and is doing a fine job. They could not be here today, so they did want me to say they were sorry that they missed it, but I hope that gives you a little insight as to my family. I now have 9 grandchildren because of those kids. The book. I'm going to talk a little bit first about a couple of sections in the book, and one of the sections has to do with the Hugo Centreville businesses, and the other section has to do with the church. The St. Genevieve Church history is a portion of the book, and it was written by Sister Mary Gabriel Walls and Sister Odile Bonin. In the Centreville Church section, we have a few pictures of the early church buildings at different times, and the rectory, and the cemetery lot. The idea of putting a book together was not really the direction I started, but when we got to the book stage, we thought that we should include some history, and that's why that section is in there. I wanted to include all of the priests' names that served in Centreville. We were able to develop a timetable for them serving at St. Genevieve's Church, and I was aided by Monsignor Lally. He did a lot of work for me in putting that in proper order. One of the most notable pastors in the St. Genevieve's Church in Centreville was Reverend Joseph Goffon. Born in France in 1824, a section of the book has been devoted to him, and it details his hardship during the winter of 1860, where he lost his leg. Any of you heard the story of why or how he survived? Cutting the carcass open and getting inside. I wasn't there, but that's what was said to me. Okay. Centreville Early Family section was to pay respects to all of the early families for all of the hard work. I did not do justice for all of their hard work. Some of those early families, the Bensons, Cardinal, DeRozier, Dupree, Dufresne, Forcier, Golden, Halley, LaValle, LaRue, Lacoste, Moore, Paranto, Peltier, Trudeau, and Turville, and Wenzel, and Valois, and many, many others. We did obtain a few photos of the Centreville School. Our family went to the Centreville School until the 50s, mid-50s, and then we transferred up to Forest Lake when they redistricted. Some of the photos in the book, as well as the Centreville grocery store, the old creamery, Peltier blacksmith shop, cheese factory, city hall, jail. We do have the Hugo Bank in there. And there was a part in there regarding Centreville's early doctor, Dr. Del Moss, how he came to the area and his practice from 1911 to 1945. I give thanks to Mr. Courteau, one of my co-authors. During the writing of the book, Mr. Courteau was an editor at the Minneapolis Tribune. He was also at that time the president of the Minnesota Genealogy Society. He wrote the introduction to the book at my request. It's an awesome read if you haven't read it fully. He was a very well-educated man. He was sure no one would ever solve the mystery of the family name, which I'll get into later. What was not part of the book was the French-Canadian family culture. We were working on birth dates, marriage dates, and death dates. Culture is really, really important. What you're doing over here in the next room over with the history of the pictures and trying to develop the culture is extremely important. The French-Canadian family culture. Most families raised large families. Most wanted to own land and raise their family. They were not interested in going into the city and sitting on a lot with a house. If you look at the families, they owned land. It was part of their way of life, and they continued it as they moved here. In the last 10 years, I've worked on the migration path of our French-Canadian family members. Most of these families moved as a unit when they left Quebec. Moving as a family unit was stressed by the Catholic Church. Now, you would wonder why. The church wanted the family to stay together. Families that left Quebec that weren't Catholic and went east, the male left. The family stayed. The church didn't like that. Who knows how long they would be away before they got enough money to go get them. They didn't want families to fall apart. So when our families moved, they moved as a unit. I didn't know that when I wrote the book, but it was expressed when I started to do a little bit of research on Houle County, Michigan, which I'll get into a little bit later. Some of my ancestors traveled through Lake Linden, which sits in Houle County, Michigan. This area had timber and sawmills. At one time, this had the largest copper reserve in the world. Their demand for laborers and for families, there was demand for laborers, and these families moved because they needed money, they needed employment, so they could continue their travels. The timber, the sawmill, the copper mine owners were from everywhere. But there was a French-Canadian owner at one of these mills by the name of Gregoire. He employed French-Canadian laborers. This area of Michigan was once known as Little Canada of Michigan. Now, the story of my involvement with the book. The history of the Michel Houle family book. In the 1970s, my parents had a great understanding of how these French-Canadian families were related to one another. My father, William Houle, and my mother, Phyllis Daninger Houle, knew many of these families firsthand. Their knowledge gave me a free and easy access to their work base. Without their help, I wouldn't have been able to figure this out. What was to happen very soon after that changed my life. I met 3 co-authors: Sister Mary Gabriel Walls, Sister Odile Bonin, and Mr. Elmer Courteau. I met all 3 of these individuals at the Visitation Convent in Mendota Heights, where Sister Mary Gabriel lived. They showed me their genealogy work that they had completed up to that date. What I said next while visiting with them taught me a lesson. I told them I was interested and I would like to help. Little did I know that those words, "I would like to help," would start this 50-plus year hobby. Maybe next time I'll think twice before I say I will help. My 3 co-authors spent years working on their family trees. They were related to each other. They were happy to make a copy of their work. They were looking for someone to help piece all of this information together. I found a large 3-ring note binder at home and started to place my co-authors' family information in order. I spent hours writing letters. I bought a typewriter, started typing names, birth dates, death dates. Gathering this information took 4+ years. I used a numbering code, which, if you've looked at the book, you've seen it. It consists of placing a series of numbers and letters by each person's name. It was to help keep track of who's who and how they're related. Without a numbering system, a reader could not follow this huge genealogy base. Now, some have asked why I picked that particular number, and there's no reason for it. I looked at a number of numbers, and I just used 54. My father thought I should add photos to the book. I said, "What book?" A book was not in my thoughts when this all started. But Dad, as usual, was correct. Placing a photo by each family's genealogy would put a face on their information. We also wanted to identify everyone on those photos. This would help for all future generations and book readers. Having a photo with no names doesn't help. The photo portion of this book brought great interest. It also helped bring attention to many families to send me their family information and a photo. The photo portion of this book took 2 years. Photo parties were hosted by my wife and I at our home. People came. They gave me their prized photos with the understanding I would make a copy and return them. There was a reluctance on a lot of parties. These prized photos were guarded by many with their lives. Sometimes the ladies got the big photo album, and the guys, sometimes brothers, didn't see them, didn't know much about them. It was the case on a lot of them that I picked up. For many, it was the first time they had viewed some of their ancestors' photos. Now, some of those seldom seen photos are in the book for all to read and view. Most of my older relatives that gave me those photos are deceased. If this action to obtain these photos had not been taken, this book would be less than half of its value in culture value. Publishing the book took a year. The process was slow. I needed time to proofread each page. As always, things can go wrong. The book printer made a number of mistakes when they placed the pages in the book, and you can see that. they're in the wrong order. All of my sheets were numbered, so checking for page errors by the printer wasn't on my radar. I made another mistake there. The book title, Michel Houle, Family of Centreville, was centered around Michel, born in 1806 in Quebec and died in Centreville. To start the numbering in the book, I gave him the number 54. His sons and daughters are listed in the book and are given the number 54A through I in the order of birth. It took me a while to find out who was older than who. So you get the photos, you get the information, but you can't do anything with it because you don't know if they're the middle child, the oldest child. So a lot of stuff stacked up, but we made our way through it. Michel Houle's father was Joseph Houle dit Bertrand. For those of you not familiar with Quebecan genealogy, dit means AKA, also known as. Sometimes a person took a second name because of recognition. Some of them were in the military. Some of them, there were two Josephs. The dit then became by the river, river being in French, or by the rocks, or by the beautiful forest, or by someone of prominence in their view. Michel Houle's mother was Jeannie Cardin dit Lassault. Lassault, military. Not much was known about Michel Houle's parents or grandparents, but before we printed the book, we obtained a copy of Michel Houle's parents' marriage dowry, and a portion of that document is in the book. Jeannie Cardin's marriage agreement with Joseph was written in French. We needed to translate this document and give our readers a brief translation to read. The translation was completed by my three co-authors. They all had some education in reading and writing French. My dad was born in 1918, spoke French until he reached second grade. His teachers told my grandparents, "Your son is failing in school because he does not speak, read, or write English very well." A change was made at their home. They started to speak in English on a daily basis to help their children. Dad excelled as the years went on. He graduated in the top of his class. And if you know my father, he read books all his adult life, and he enjoyed them. The translated marriage document by my co-authors was not correctly translated in 1975. Some 30 years after the book was printed, I hired a genealogist from Ogden, Utah. During those 30 years, I wrote often to PRDH, the database center in Montreal, for all French Canadian records. I was trying to break down my first brick wall. I worked with the top two genealogists at that time there. One was Dr. Rene Jett. If you ever looked at Jett files, all right, he's now deceased. The other one I was talking to is the current gentleman in charge, Dr. Bernard Desjardins, now head of PRDH in Montreal. During those 30 years, PRDH Quebec and Ancestry.com and I did not know who the grandparents of Michel Houle were. Nobody knew. No one knew why our name in Canada was Houle, dit patron. PRDH said I would never know who his grandparents were. My dad never heard his parents or grandparents say why their name in Canada was Houle dit Patran. Sometimes I will say patron and patran. Depending on who wrote the name, you will see it spelled a couple of ways. Brick walls in the genealogy world can be huge. In 2011, I finally broke my first brick wall when we translated the marriage document correctly. After we found the proof, we asked PRDH in Montreal to review the information. PRDH agreed with me and said there were a lot of family members looking for this newfound information. That marriage dowry showed us the grandmother of Michel Houle was Madeleine Peranto. She signed her name on the marriage document with an X. She couldn't read or write. This new information solved one mystery, but it did not solve the question of why, in Canada, our name was known as Houle dit Patran. During the years after I wrote the book, I used Ancestry website a lot to solve the mystery. What did I find? Ancestry did not have the information I was looking for, as no one had provided them the information I was looking for. If it isn't in there, someone has to put it in. PRDH may not have the answer either, as no one has connected the dots. Other reasons might be a misfiled document in the church and other records burned, church records not transferred when a church merged. In those early years, they merged as well as what's happening today. Or a misfiled document in PRDH base. You wouldn't think that would happen. I wrote to the church in Yamaska requesting copies of birth, marriage, and death dates for Michel Houle's brothers and sisters. I thought that if I could find a member up there in Canada, they might have the missing information. I wrote to many of them and left messages on Ancestry's webpage. And if you go back on Ancestry, you will see where they have what they call message boards. In the early years of Ancestry, when the book was written, they were called queries. My name's on every other page up there. And I didn't get many responses. Nobody had the information. This second book, this one, now includes birth, marriage, death documents on Michel Houle's brothers and sisters. All of that information was not known to me when I published the book in 1978. Again, I was told by PRDH I would never break my second wall. My second wall was, who was the father of Joseph Houle dit Patran? In hopes of breaking down this wall, I decided to look at the area map of around Yamaska in Canada. In 1970, the mode of transportation was foot, horse, or boat. People, for the most part, didn't travel too far for goods, work, or play. In looking at an area map, I drew a circle around Yamaska with a 40-mile radius. I started to write to the churches within this circle to obtain the birth records for all Joseph Houles born around 1750, and I found 4 boys in that time frame. Further research told me that 2 of the boys had died before they reached age 15. The 2 remaining gave information on their parents and where they lived. 1 child was married and had a family, and all seemed okay. The other child was married 3 times, had no children. Now what? During these last few years, my sister Rosemary, who's not here, she lives in Texas, expressed an interest in our family history, and the two of us have been working together on this issue. She suggested to me I should take a DNA test while holding a subscription to Ancestry.com. I agreed and sent my test information into Ancestry. They have a program that analyzes the DNA through a program they call Through Lines. While waiting for the results, my sister and I both came to the same conclusion, and the DNA tests proved we were right. Our lost family member, Joseph Houle Ditpatran, was born to Madeline Peranto. The DNA test proved that Madeline Peranto is my fourth great-grandmother. The DNA test proved that Joseph Marie Houle, born in 1749 in Berthierville, is my fourth great-grandfather. Part of the other proof is from the baptism document, which we found. It was misfiled in the PRDH database under the name Houle, H-O-R-E-L. You are never going to find someone in the Johnson family if you're looking for a Houle. I submitted my DNA test to PRDH, my test results, and their misfiled baptism certificate to give proof and to let them know I now believe this couple are my fourth great-grandparents. PRDH agreed, and they have attached my name to the corrected PRDH database as the provider of the proof. PRDH later stated how important this misfiled and now corrected information is. The second mystery has now been solved. Joseph Houle Ditpatran was raised by his mother's first cousin, Francois Patran, and his spouse, Elizabeth Gier. To honor these two family members, Joseph takes the name Houle Ditpatran. Couple notes of interest. Earlier in the Quebec history is a story of fake or false saltiniers. They were arrested many times in France for selling salt and not giving the tax money to the system. In 1736, a large number of men left France by ship, arrived in Quebec. They were all deported with the understanding they could not return to France. Two of the men on that ship was Francois Patran, born 1714, the father of the gentleman that took care of our Joseph, and George Jerry's, thought to be his cousin. This will be quite interesting to some of you here, this next one, and getting close to the end. During my research, after we got the database corrected, I found the name Catherine the Huron in our lineage, from the Durand side of the family, 1749. If you have time and interest, Google this lady's name. What is most important to me was most of her family died in a raid at the hands of the Iroquois. Catherine was a baby in 1749. At the time, her mother fled the village. Her father died in battle, but her mother left Lake Huron by canoe with others in the family, still alive and trying to avoid being caught or killed. Catherine and her mother and others fled their village and traveled hundreds of miles east and then south from Lake Huron to Quebec. Catherine and her mother survived the trip, but her mother died while Catherine was very young. A local priest placed Catherine in an Ursuline convent for girls after her mother died. Catherine learned to read and write and was well educated in those years at the convent. That nun that helped Catherine with her education while she was at the convent was considered to be her second mother. That nun's name was Sister Mary Ursuline. Sister Mary would become Sister Saint Marie of the Incarnation by Pope John Paul II. I found Catherine to be my 8th great-grandmother. If you have time and would like to read that story of Catherine, there is considerable amount of work that's been put in the Google website. I, for one, believe she was protected by God. Again, her name, Catherine Annetta the Huron, 1749. Are my days of research over? Not yet. At the present time, I'm working with a genealogist in British Columbia, as she has ties to a genealogist in Austria. My mother, Phyllis Danninger Houle, is part French through the Gier family, and part Austrian through the Danninger family, part of which are in Forest Lake. I've been waiting for COVID, as you, to relax in Austria, so my researches can continue. This project has been on hold since March of last year. There are a large number of families waiting to find the new information, if we can find it. My last project, what to do with all of this information. I would like to find a techie person, family related, to scan these documents and insert them into the database for all to read, copy, and enjoy. For those of you that have knowledge that your family went through Michigan, there is a number of places you can go and pick up the history. Some of the history is very detailed. It's French Canadians of Michigan. It's in the Saginaw Valley and the Keenaw Peninsula. The online one is free if you want to just, I guess there's 35 pages here. But it talks about where you can write to get the information. You can go to the courthouse. You can go to the church. Now, part of my family went through Lake Linden. John Baptiste. John Baptiste married a German lady, and she died at Lake Linden in childbirth. It wasn't known to me who she was. I found that piece of information, and that was Ann Negelmeyer. And I have searched for her parents. I'm still looking for that information. John Baptiste married again to Virginia Turville. That's how the Turvilles come in. They had one child, and that was Philip, the baker here in Hugo. After the baby was born, they moved. And we believe they moved through Duluth. Michel Houle had already been in Duluth. So John Baptiste and Michel were in Duluth during the winter and came back. So they knew the route where the family was. Francois Lamotte was already in Centreville. So they were following, as all of these French Canadian families were, just some before others. Folks, I'm going to stop there and take some questions. Also, for those of you that were, and maybe at the town as well, do you know if you have this book? This is the history of Washington County as written by Reverend Neal. He was,
Library here in Forest Lake.
it's there.
Yeah, I've read it there.
Okay. When you inquired about how was the namesake, I wrote and bought this book and read it. But in here, of course, are other towns within Washington County. So it's a good read for those of you that want to know something about Forest Lake, Scandia, Stillwater, et cetera, et cetera. During my years of working in this, we were looking for documents of marriage, adoption, death, and of course, marriage. We would go to what you would call a notary's website. A notary back in those days was like an attorney. He would take care of the documents, the legal documents. Now, I'm going to give this one here to Don. It has to do with John Baptiste Faribault. Know the name at all? Okay. Born in Berthierville, same as our family. When I looked up in the notary records, I was looking at him. This gentleman moved down into the Twin Cities. And he was over in Prairie du Chien that you're wanting to go to. They named the town of Faribault, Minnesota after this gentleman. It's surprising how intertwined these families are. I'll give this one to you, Don. Any questions? Don.
You pointed to this book here. Are you publishing another book? Is that what you're saying?
Nope. Okay.
So what is it?
This is the birth dates, marriage dates. These are copies of the originals. They're not hand-scribed. What I want to do is to get a hold of a techie person and see if I can the Houle book has 4 generations. This has 1. This thing here now goes back to 1500 through Ancestry. This needs to be stuck in there, and all of these documents. All of the research papers that I've ever received are here. I think they should be scanned and stuck into Ancestry so that you can see how I came up with this, if that's what you have in mind, or for those. Otherwise, what happens to them?
Where would they appear in Ancestry?
They would appear in the gallery, the section that has pictures and documents, okay? And as I understand, I can put anything I want in there as far as the number of them. But if it's related to Michel, if it's related to his wife or whatever, it should go in there. All of Michel's family is in, his brothers and sisters are here. Brothers and sisters of Michel, Joseph, Jeannie. Jeannie marries a Salivas, stays in Canada. Marie Josette marries a Martin, Pierre Martin. Marguerite, Francois Vadnais. Julie marries Leon Benoit. Marianne marries Pierre Vadnais. And I believe Pierre is the one that was in that Vadnais Heights area. Michel marries Genevieve Cartier to begin with, and then marries Marie Latale. Jean Baptiste marries Marie Marthu. There's 3 children after that, and they all died at a young age, but all of the documentation is there, and I want to preserve it for those who wish to read it, is my thinking of putting it into Ancestry. I hate to have this all just thrown away some year.
I could help that. I don't want to say I would do the work. But I could show you, I have a scanner that would do that in a couple hours.
It's a matter of taking one document at a time and then telling you where it should go, whose name it should go under.
Oh, afterwards, yeah.
But I mean, while it's being done, it can't all be put under Michelle. Michelle's sister needs to go under Michelle's sister's info. Yeah. So it gets a little in, but that's a good idea. Yes, ma'am.
And you were going to talk about Dr. Delmas. Can you talk a little bit about him?
I had that thing written, and I don't know where it is, but
Our neighbor is his grandson.
yeah, I looked at the book the other night because I was going to take some information out of that. Dr. Delmas was over in eastern part of the United States, and somehow Centreville newspaper got over there asking for a doctor. He ends up coming over to Centreville, and he serves Hugo as well. Yes.
My mom used to say that the reason, she was born in 1913, but she always said the reason the Hugo school was so good was because of Dr. Delmas, because he was such a well-educated man, and he made sure that they had good qualified teachers.
Yep, there you go.
He was a homeopath. He went to Yale Medical School.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also some of the plants that he gathered, I think it was his son later became a physician and said that, now those medicines are in synthetic form.
Right.
But he knew about them when in the plant form.
Plant form. Yeah, he was an early person on that issue. Yes.
Are you going to update the book?
What's that?
Are you going to update the Michel?
No, I don't think I've got enough time. My research still goes on, and the idea was to not even fill in after the book was published. My idea was to find what was missing, and I'm still working on that in my family tree, on the Daninger side.
On that Daninger side, how is that spelled at this time?
Daninger.
I may have a connection.
Okay. Also, what's that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Since you took your DNA test, have you uploaded the raw DNA to your GenMatch or MyHeritage?
No.
You get a lot more matches. Anybody that's done like 23andMe and whatnot, get your result.
Does it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
If whoever's uploaded,
Okay.
What was the site that you just said?
GenMatch.
No, the site where you can merge all three of your,
Oh, GenMatch.
okay,
GEDMATCH.com.
okay.
Any other questions?
You must have started this when you were in your 20s.
He's only 30 now.
I know. I mean,
Yeah, it was quite some time ago. And with that much information, it seems like it's taking its toll, although I think my bypass surgery had something to do with that. Because I think sometimes maybe if you didn't have all the blood you need at a certain time, you can start losing your memory. And I've found that if I'm talking to people, I must keep it real simple, because the train of thought goes away. My work on this book, I'll see if I can get it up here. You're not connected. Oh, that's right. I do my work in the basement of my house. It's a spot I've got set up under the wife's orders to keep it off the kitchen table. And I work on it, quite extensively, so to speak. I have to say I give a lot of thanks to my wife for putting up with, before this book was published. That kitchen table wasn't a kitchen table, it was a dining room table. It was 3 by 8, I think it was. And it had information from one end to the other. I mean, it was a lot of information coming in. And keeping track of it was really quite a challenge. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any chance that you would extend it? This was completed in the 60s, right? So the family's in there. If you extended it from there.
Well, I was going to put this up online here, but I'm not connected to that machine. But I think when we go in the room next door, I can show you my pedigree. At this point, it goes back on Ancestry. I could bring it up on the screen, but I made another mistake. I didn't have the lady. Who's techie in here?
What do you want?
Well, I want to get my Ancestry website to show up on the wall.
Oh. Bluetooth? Do you have a Bluetooth connection? Or you need I think you need to be connected to the internet.
When you went to Bluetooth, you left me.
Cynthia's getting in person.
Oh, you're, whatever it is.
The coffee or the water's running out.
Oh. Those of you that have been tracing your genealogy, any of them gone through Michigan
Yeah.
that you know of? Okay. This is a very, very interesting, the French Canadians of Michigan is one of them. That's this book. Jean Lemire. This one here is online, and it's just the French Canadian Genealogy Research of Houle County. Okay, no problem. We'll leave it alone. Well, folks, I thank you. It was an honor to be here today. I hope some of this is new to some of you, to my immediate family. Not again, I hope you're going to talk, but
He just. Are you ever coming back?
well, I'm back into the Twin Cities usually once a month. I'd have to have an invite if someone was interested, yes.
There's a really good Facebook group called French Canadians of Upper Michigan, or something like that. And they have all sorts of really interesting stuff that you don't see on other Facebook. So you gotta look it up if you're on Facebook. Yeah. You'll enjoy it. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, you can see here, this is Michel Houle. From this way back is in the book. One, two, three, 4 generations in this segment.
Hude, that's the one that we knew about, Hude.
This is the lady I was talking about, Madeline Parano, and the missing gentleman. Now, excuse me.
This area Toronto that are
can't.
Is the Toronto that you have up there related to the Torontos that are here in this area? Your answer is yeah.
Yes, yes.
Let's see if we can find, there's the Durans.
You basically said families moved in entirety from Canada. So
Father, mother, children.
children.
That was the unit I was talking about.
Right, so
This here is the lady I was talking to you about. They call Catherine the Huron. This part of Ancestry.com, it allows us to put in a map so that you can see. And with that, when you click on that map, you can then enlarge it. Sorry about the computer taking time here. You start moving this thing in. You can see any area of Canada that you wish. You can figure out the
Three Rivers is their big one, right?
right here.
Yep.
You can figure out the migration path here, here, back up here, here. Here's Houghton County, Michigan, right here. Here's Duluth.
So they came mostly by boat.
I would believe they did. If you think of it, and I was trying to put some numbers, dollars and cents to it, how many dollars did they earn in a day? How many days did it take to earn enough money for the boat fare? Now, that boat fare went to where? Then they needed boat fare to go up and keep moving. So some of these people sold what they had and got on the boat, or they walked, or they rode a horse. I mean, there was no railroad going east and west at that point. That railroad didn't show up until years after our family left. Now, this is the second migration out of Quebec. The first migration was during the fur trading, but we weren't part of that. Yes?
Was it, do we know where they came from in France? Because I took my mother back to France to quote, find her roots, and we went to an area in the Percheron Forest. In Minot or Minu. And then we went up to Honfleur, which was where the boats supposedly left in that time. That was across the isthmus from Le Havre, I think it was Le Havre, is on the other side of the river, which is the bigger port today, but apparently when they came, the other city was the bigger city. Honfleur was the bigger city. Today, Honfleur is more of a tourist town, tourist city.
What is put in here at this point, as far as a home base? Well, Pierre, back in 1500, is right here.
By cart.
I'll let those of you that read French tell me what that is.
Well, something sur is by,
Okay.
so whatever the M town is, sur, by, are known. Yeah. So I'm wondering if that's the lake, the name of the lake.
Could be.
But leave it up larger, because I'm trying to see the city that we went to.
Too big.
Yeah, that was too big. Because we went, we stayed in Chart. But I'm not seeing Chart on here. Chart is due west of Paris.
Is it right at top there? CHAIRO?
No,
What's really missing for me in the last 50 years is being able to read, write, or speak French. Now, you walk downtown in Twin Cities now, and you can go into the malls, and people are speaking English and whatever. They still regard it as part of their life. Why didn't we continue? Because we were told, speak English. When I started to work up in the PRDH folks, with those folks, they gave me what for? That I could not speak, read, or write. What happened to you folks? He said. I said, that's a way of life here.
or you were made fun of.
Well,
When you
yeah.
went to school, you were made fun of.
My dad was, yeah.
My mother was.
Yeah.
Half sentences, half in English, half in French.
Yeah. Do you remember Willie Riopel? He spoke French. I'm sure you talked to him today, he would speak French.
My mother spoke French.
And Willie is born in 46. So, you know, there was a change there. But
1949 is when they quit doing masses in French.
oh. Mass? Okay. Yes.
My mother was the youngest in a Marrier family, and when she would get together with her family, they'd all speak French and tell jokes, and us kids there knew what the heck they were talking about. But that's why they did it in French. Yeah, and they had a good time. But I don't see anything about Marriers anywhere, what you're talking about. They came from the Tres Rivers.
Three River.
Three Rivers. See, I can't even speak.
Trois Rivières. Trois.
Well, all right,
Yeah.
whatever. That one. That's the area that I have a blue book on that they came from.
Right.
That is wrong.
Huh?
Did they marry into the rules?
I don't know.
No, they
I'm lost.
That's what his book is.
No, Wilson, Marrier,
No.
Marrier, we met.
That's because he's from a different district. Michigan.
But it's good, 300 pages.
Take care. Thanks for coming.
We're going to take the troops out for a little while.
Okay. Thank you. You betcha. Yes.
Once again, I want to thank everybody for coming with us. We're doing the Don Marrier's group is now going to have a meet in the same room. Do we need to move those tables off?
We did.
So